Hello and welcome to Corn on the Call, the podcast for your Normal CornBelters. Thank you to Blow No Pizza Co. for hosting this podcast at their location in Normal, Illinois. I'm Braden Fogerson alongside Meagan Ruger-Smith.
Today we have a special guest with us, baseball analytics intern Jeff Grover. Thank you, Jeff, for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be on and help you guys out talking about CornBelters.
Yeah, so today we will be talking about this week's Normal CornBelters games. We had a pretty exciting matchup this Saturday that ended in a weather delay and cancellation. We'll talk a little bit about how the Prospect League is shaping up. We're kind of very deep into the season at this point compared to our first few podcasts. We have a little bit of a better understanding how things are looking and the competition that we will face in the coming weeks. So it's going to be a nice little conversation about how the CornBelters are doing as a team, maybe some new roster additions or people that we have seen be standout players, maybe some players of the week, players of the month. So let's get started, guys.
Well, the first thing I'd like to talk about, and just to give some context for the situation, is just to go over the divisions as we always have done this year so far. In the Ohio River Valley Division, Chillicothe leads that division still by quite a bit. By over 5 games, it looks like it's 16-9 for them on 16-9 on the season. In the Wabash River Division, the Danville Dans, who the CornBelters will play here shortly, right? The Danville Dans, who the Normal CornBelters will play here soon. They're 17-8 and leading the Wabash River Division, just ahead of Rex and Illinois Valley. In the Prairie Land Division, the Alton River Dragons up 15-10 over the O'Fallon Hoots, who are 14-11. And in the CornBelters Division, the Great River Division, they're just behind the Quincy Gems by half a game. The Gems are 13-12, when the CornBelters are at 12-12. Lumber Kings trailing 11-14 on the year, and the Bees rounding out the division 10-15. So the CornBelters in the division, we've talked about it all year. We've predicted it coming into the year. This is definitely the tightest division, and this is still the strategy that the CornBelters are going to have to deal with, that every game counts because there's just so much competitive baseball being played in the Great River Division right now. CornBelters are 3-7, so they're coming off a little bit of a rough stretch, but they're going to have to try and turn around here soon, and we'll see what they have in store for us this week.
I think something, too, that's important to remember about the standings, too, is the Prospect League does the playoffs a little bit differently. So how that works is the midway point, the leaders of the standings at the midway point of the season, they're going to be taking home first place, and they're going to clinch home field advantage. And that's coming up on, I believe, July 4th is what I was told this morning. So it's running out of time, and it's really a tight race. I mean, I think, especially in the CornBelters case, the Quincy Gems and the CornBelters obviously the top two right now. The Belters only a half game behind. But I think really it's anyone's race really coming up in this final week. And then how it'll work in the back half of the season is if a different team finishes in first, they will clinch second place and put the first place team at home. But if the same team finishes at first, then it actually goes to the second place team.
Okay. And that's like, I know AA does the same thing. They work it the same way as well. That's a very big deal then. You have this last week and they're only down half a game. But the CornBelters had been still technically leading the division for most of the season, so it's got to be a little bit frustrating that the CornBelters now find themselves down this late in it. But the CornBelters have certainly shown that they have a really good team in the division, so I would assume they're still in good shape for this final week.
So we saw at the beginning of the season, the CornBelters kind of came out of the gate pretty hot, and they were winning a fair amount, and then we kind of saw them tail where, like, the last, week and a half, I know when I broadcast last Saturday when they played the Danville Dans, they were on they lost 8 of 10. So can we talk a little more about, the weird shift we've seen with the CornBelters this season so far?
Well, I think that it was more just it's a very balanced division, as I think you guys have talked about. And I think that they had some hot baseball in there, and then they had some cold baseball in there. But I think that even though they did have a bit they obviously split the doubleheader, and then they had 2 really close games this week, the Wednesday game and the Friday game. Both were run games where they lost in the last, I think on walkouts in both games. The game between that was 16-1, so maybe not as close. But I was definitely encouraged really by the last two games. So, and I'm sure we'll get into that more. Are the home game that we got this week, the 4-3 game that obviously ended in a rain delay, but still Danville is 17-8 this year. So that's definitely a big win to pick up against them. And I was really encouraged by yesterday's game. Yesterday, I'm sure we'll talk about that more too. They won 10-3 against the Springfield Lucky Horseshoes. They managed to put up 11 hits. All of them were on singles. A big hitter there, Jeremy Figueroa, is really starting to slide into the lineup well. He went 3 for 4 with 1 RBI. Peyton Meredith is continuing. He's normally he has been a catcher, but they've been putting him more at second now with the addition of John Stallcup, one of the new players. And really, it's good to see that I think 6 different people had RBIs for us yesterday. And also, really more important too, the most encouraging sign from yesterday was Michael Scalafini in his debut for the CornBelters. He's from Lewis University, so you may know from the KCL, David Fitzpatrick is from there. There's one other Belter that's from Lewis University, but I can't remember off the top of my head. But he went 6 innings, 7 hits, 0 earned, and 6 Ks. That was definitely encouraging too. He was followed up by Kobe Rogers, another new one. He went 2 innings to 3 earned. And then Caleb Jacobs also came in with 1 inning, and he also pitched a shutout inning. It was just overall, I think, a real team effort yesterday. As I said, there was nobody that had an extra base hit, and I think that it overall was a really encouraging sign. As we head in, they have 5 games left to really make a statement. They have one of those is against the Quincy Gems. It's definitely the game I'm watching this week as kind of their most important game. And I think it's something that they definitely have a really good chance, I think, this week of maybe going in and getting that first place back.
And Megan, I'd like to ask you, what do you think about what it changes when you have new players like this that can bring, perhaps maybe some new energy to a lineup when you're in the back half of the first half of your season?
So I know something we talk about both on this podcast and our broadcast for PLTV is the chemistry that we saw the Normal CornBelters have. We talked about how at the very beginning of the season, like all the players would come greet the pitcher after he finished every single inning. And seeing that just within the first week or two of all these different players from across the country coming together and creating this really awesome chemistry. And then, they've gotten to a routine, they've had some really tough losses. And right now we're seeing them kind of pick it back up against, the Dans, who are doing very well this season and are putting together a great team. And so bringing in these new players who have these stellar first outings and are putting up good numbers already has to be a huge morale boost for the team, knowing that they have these players coming in, helping them out, and just being beneficial for the team. And I'm sure it is great because we are getting into the tail end of the season. And I know that we're kind of at the midway point, and we have a lot of home games at the end because we have a KCL play at the Corn Crib. And, morale boost is so huge because you get into a rut because baseball is such a long season. But then you have these new players and it becomes a new dynamic and you're learning each other's how their rhythm works. And it's so new and fresh that you kind of get revitalized and you have a newer team and you just look forward to what you can do, especially with a big chunk of home games at the end of the season.
And I think that that's good that you touched on that because that now means if the CornBelters can clinch first place in the division this week, as opposed to having to wait till the second half of the season to try and clinch playoffs, that would be a huge load off their shoulders, not to mention the fact that they're now going to be playing at home a lot more frequently here in the near future. It's just a big deal that they've been able to be this close to potentially clinching the division here throughout the part of the schedule that seems to be certainly the toughest.
Yeah, I think you look at the schedule and you see the road games and you see some of their opponents. They played the Dans a bunch. They have Alton River Dragons coming up tonight. That's another tough one. And they have a bunch of road games, and they're still fighting for first place. I think if you're looking at it as the CornBelters, I think that you're probably expecting that your best chance of clinching is going to be obviously in the second half. You have way more games. You're going to be seeing a lot more of some of the teams with losing records. West Virginia, Lafayette is just over 500. You're going to see the Bees a few games. You're going to see the Lumber Kings a few games. And you're going to see the Cape Catfish, some teams that really haven't played as much on this front end that you're going to get on the back end. But again, as a great point, that if you can somehow find a way to clinch in this first playoff spot, then you're really looking good for the rest of the season.
So one of the things we talk about when I broadcast for hockey is one of our keys to the game is play the full 60 minutes. Is even if you're up by 3 or 4 goals, you play every second you're on the ice, you are playing at your full potential. And that is what the CornBelters need to continue doing is we see their energy. We see them celebrate with each other and have this just wonderful chemistry. And when they're on the field, they need to be playing the full 9 innings or the full 7 innings if it's a doubleheader, and not getting complacent because it's baseball. Like, baseball is a sport where anything can happen. And so just not getting complacent and putting your trust in your teammates, I think, has been something huge. And I think I know with Bodie Gabank, you can tell that the players, his defense, have a rhythm with him. Is Bodie Gabank knows his defense is going to cover him. And so he can play a little more with like hitting, like making the batters take ground balls. Because, Chatterton can turn a double play and he's fast. Or, Watson can turn a good play, And so that is huge for a team. And the CornBelters have done such a good job with that this year and they're keeping games close. They've had a few blowout losses and they've had 1 or 2 blowout wins, but against the Dans, we've seen 3 to 4 games, like twice against the Dans recently, and showing that they are fighting these games and not getting down and letting the Dans kind of like score more runs than necessary is huge for the CornBelters, like productivity and their potential like win rate.
I also certainly tend to agree with that mantra of, playing playing the full 60 minutes, in this case, playing the full 9 innings. You can't act just because you're going into a game against one of the teams with a lower record. Like, you're going to go in there and just whoop them and, easily win the ball game, because, anyone can win a baseball game. If you have 2 teams in the same league, it doesn't matter if you're a 90 on your win percentage or a 20. There's going to be, if you play 2-3 games against each other, there's a pretty good chance at least one of those games is going to be won by the underdog. And so you really got to be able to take into account that fact and try and push and try and give it your all, no matter how good or bad your opponent is. You also can't just go in there and sulk and feel like you're going to lose against a team like, Rex, for example, something like that, a team that looks really good and perhaps maybe seems better than you statistically, because this CornBelters team has a pretty good offense and they have a good pitching staff as well. We've seen it in flashes, and if they can continue to fight hard and play well, then that's the kind of results that you're going to get.
So we touched on it a little bit earlier about both Jeff and I mentioned the game on Saturday against the Dans that went into a weather cancellation. And then we also talked about the last game the CornBelters played, where all of their hits were singles. And I think we can kind of compare these 2 games and create a picture of what the CornBelters team is looking like from an offensive standpoint. Is something I firmly believe in baseball that is underrated is like the power of small hits. It's so important to get walks and to get singles, because you start these rallies and just this team finds the momentum where they're seeing the pitcher get rattled each time there's another single, and he's like getting more men on base, and the pitcher is worried, like, okay, so like the bases are loaded again. He might start throwing more pitches that are either like straight down the middle to try and get the batter out on a fastball, or maybe pitches outside the zone because he's kind of losing control. And so I think the power of hitting singles is going to be huge for the CornBelters, especially because they do have such a deep roster.
No, definitely. The game that they hit 3 home runs in the first 2 innings, that's definitely expect that to be an outlier. Definitely, I think that they played a large part in that. I did mention it too. The first game, actually both games, they didn't have any extra base hits, and they won both games. In fact, in the 4-3 game, they didn't even have any RBIs. They scored on a bunch of different ways. I think they had a sack line, but that was really it was a sack bunt, so they really didn't have any RBIs by anyone. That's really just goes to show that it's really a full team effort. There was just looking at it, they scored on a walk, they scored on a wild pitch. Of course, my favorite moment of the entire game, Jackson Chatterton stealing home. That was a really awesome thing to see. And then another wild pitch. So all 4 of the runs were scored off of non-RBI situations, and really just getting men on base through hit, or whether it's through singles, whether it's through walks, and really just doing a good job of making sure that we're getting people and we're moving them around the bases.
Yeah, and on that Saturday game against Danville, it was just fascinating to watch the CornBelters. Like, I feel like they're a very crafty team, especially, you see Jackson Chatterton steal home. I know that I was next to the PA room, and just like the 4 people working in the PA room we're all like looking at each other and we're like, oh my God, did he really steal home? Because that's something you really see, especially like in the major league. Only players from like Javi Baez, you kind of have the gall to an aggressive move like that. And Chatterton is one of those guys, and he steals a lot of bases. He's fast. And, if you were watching, you could see him take big leadoffs. And he saw the moment where the pitcher was like going to throw and that he wasn't looking at Chatterton. He took that opportunity. And that's intelligence to have, is to be aware of everything that's happening on the field. And the CornBelters have such good focus for that. And I know I've seen Figueroa on the base pass. He's been very good about knowing when to steal, when to kind of rattle the pitcher by taking bigger and bigger leadoffs. And just seeing the CornBelters score, it kind of was hilarious. It was like Groundhog Day, where like a guy would get on, steal, and then maybe steal again, and he'd be at third, and then a wild pitch and he scores. Like that happened multiple times in one game. And so it's so interesting to see like the CornBelters found a rhythm in that game, and they began to prepare for when the catcher Bain might let a ball slip, and they were looking forward to it instead of kind of getting lazy on the base path. They stayed vigilant, and even though it was a close game, they still had the upper hand because of their intelligence and their vigilance, and they just played the whole game with full effort.
Yeah, the stealing of the base is another thing. I mean, you're obviously touching on it, talking about their aggression on the base paths, but this team is – I've never seen a baseball team where I've been able to regularly watch games and feel as confident in the idea that they're going to want to steal a base, because they do it all the time. And the catchers in this league aren't amazing to the fact that it's all that much of a risk to try and steal a base. It's much more likely that you're going to be able to attempt to steal a base. And as long as you have a relatively fast guy out there on the base pass, you're going to be able to take it. And when you're able to manufacture runs that way, that helps you score when you're not getting big hits, not getting a bunch of extra base hits. You're just a lot of small ball and things like that. That way, when you get a run on second instead of stuck on first, a single can score potentially. So run manufacturing like that's really good management-wise, and the CornBelters have taken advantage.
No, it's definitely a good point. I mean, they had 4 stolen bases that game and 5 walks to go along with those. It's really not about, you look at the team that had 4 hits and you say, well, how did they score 4 runs? And I think that's really your answer there, is all those stolen bases, all those walks, really just making sure that just moving people around, as I said.
It keeps a pitcher from getting settled in as well. You look at 4 hits on your hit column, you would think the pitcher's really confident, but when he's thrown to his catcher and his catchers are consistently letting hitters go or letting runners go and advance on the base paths, it's frustrating because you've got this guy stuck at first. You've limited these guys to walks and a bunch of small hits and, being able to pitch contact, not giving up too many big hits. If that's the type of pitching you want to be able to do, but you're facing a team that just consistently is able to run on you, no matter how hard you try, you're not going to be able to limit those runs on, errors or, quick plays where it's just a lot of stuff happening. We've seen a lot of that at CornBelters games as well. Like I've been broadcasting, I'm like, man, I don't even know how to describe this play. There's so much happening in one play. It's, overloading these players that are trying to beat the CornBelters with things that they need to think about, certain scenarios and things like that. And it keeps a pitcher from getting settled into a game.
And a hot button issue with, I know the MLB is home runs is, because I always think baseball is a very like nuanced sport, and why a lot of people call baseball boring. And this is not an insult. It's just because they don't understand the strategy of the sport itself, is because they're not understanding what the pitcher is throwing these pitches for. They don't know why he's going for a sinker instead of a 4-seam this time. And they don't understand what the batter is doing. And so people are like, oh, well, he got out again. And, some people don't like respect like a close 1-0 game, maybe like a walk-off, and instead we want to see all of these big home runs. And, the CornBelters, they do have a few home runs under their belt, pun intended, because they're the CornBelters. And I think that's funny. But just the nuance of them getting hits and just getting small hits and not hitting big home runs is kind of an art that we have kind of lost in Major League Baseball, is hitting, like getting rallies and, getting guys on, getting them over through singles, maybe a double, and recognizing the smaller plays that connect for a larger scale of runs, as opposed to like, oh, he hit a grand slam, it was like a 4-2 game. And to see these college guys take part in this mentality of a collaborative game where it's, I'm not gonna aim for a home run. I'm instead going to go for a single to advance this runner and get me on. For them, it's not about the glory of hitting home runs. And I love to see that in, younger players who are looking to be drafted or looking to go back to their D1, D2 colleges, and to take these philosophies back with them, where it's not about, me, myself getting like huge home run stats and all of these like large RBI numbers and to like show off that, but instead it's about the team, and it's about the team win and not an individual win, which is just a huge aspect for baseball. It is such a team sport, and that cannot be overlooked for the CornBelters.
I, as a Cardinal fan, will certainly appreciate a Cubs fan talking about how much she loves 1980s Whitey ball, because I know that was something that the Cardinals certainly led when the 80s were becoming an era of small ball and things like that. But I would also like to transition now to pitching, since we've been talking a lot about hitting. And I'd like to ask you, because you've been watching a lot of CornBelters baseball as well, Jeff, is we were able to talk to the coaches a week ago about a lot of stuff about the CornBelters roster. And one thing that they were mentioning was that Luke Olson was considered their ace. That's how they felt that he was, fitting into their roster, was their ace as their starter. You've got a lot of different you got a lot of different pitchers that have been able to make appearances for the CornBelters, and there's certain pitchers that really stand out as leaders in the ERA and stuff like that. Would you consider Luke Olson to be still that ace, that guy that is the most reliable pitcher for the CornBelters?
I definitely consider him like still the ace. He's definitely still there. It was really fun to see him bat that one game too. I think that was something the whole team got excited about. But that doesn't mean that they don't have a good option. I don't think it's Luke Olson and then we have a huge drop. I think it's Luke Olson and then right under him we have Jake Armstrong. He's the leader in the team with wins as well as strikeouts, and he's right up there with a good amount of very few walks, and he's also been able to eat a lot of innings. I do think that I don't want to get too excited too early, but I do think that just based on yesterday, Michael Scalafini, I believe that's how you say it. I think that he's someone that's going to be thrown in there in the mix as well. By the way, the other Lewis player I did double check was Kane Hedrick, is the other Lewis player, so they are teammates at Lewis University. But that's not to say that even then it stops there. I think that Christopher Pupini has been another really good starter for them. And I think just looking at the pen, I think that the number one option there is maybe his stats haven't been there every single day, but his stuff has been there. And Spencer Smith, he's definitely someone that's been talked about. He has 3 saves for the team. And I think that overall, they're definitely just a team that, kind of looking at the stats so far, I think that they're a team that, on top of that small ball, they're definitely going to have to rely on their pitching, because I don't think that they can power their way through to a championship.
We talked about, I know in the first podcast, we talked about what makes home field advantage, and we talked about the energy and the kids and the theme nights and, the PA voices that are friendly and welcoming.
The raining tacos.
The raining taco song, which everyone wants to hear. I was just thinking about raining tacos and putting it in this podcast. Maybe we should do that in post.
This we can just just the entire podcast underneath is just
raining tacos for however long this is.
I really can't believe that. The first time I heard that song, I was like, man, this is gonna get annoying really quickly. And now when I'm in the PA booth and someone hits a home run, I'm like talking to these person, giving him time.
Yeah, it's hilarious because when we were starting this season, we're like, this is the song. This is our home run song, and I'm gonna have to play this every time there's a home run. And now I'm like, was that a home run? Can I play raining tacos? Is it time for tacos?
I'm like doing this, like making big motions.
Literally the PA booth, we're all like dancing for raining tacos.
Yeah, that's not only the sound, the song itself, but just the feeling of the excitement of getting the crowd into a game when you have a big moment like that. That's what makes raining tacos so special, and that's what, going back to the question itself, what makes home games so special is that the Corn Crib isn't really leading in attendance. I think part of the fact is that the Corn Crib's not quite as big as some of these other teams that are coming from different leagues that used to expect a lot bigger crowds that are able to fit more people within them. But the Corn Crib, what it lacks in room for people, it makes up for in the amount of fun that everyone in the Corn Crib is having. There's always stuff going on. There's always, promos and things like that, special jerseys that get people excited for the game. Fans can go back and, exchange a foul ball they get for a treat, which if not, you're going to be 14. You're like, why do I have this baseball sitting here? I don't even remember what it was doing here. There's just ways to, get into a game like this. And no matter how much you understand baseball or how little, you're able to have fun. I know when I would go to Major League Baseball games as a kid, I had fun there, not because I understood anything about the game. I couldn't even point to the shortstop and tell you, oh, yeah, that's the shortstop. I had no idea who it was yet. But I still was able to have fun just because, there's just so much stuff happening. The music playing, the in-between innings stuff going on. It's so much fun to be able to watch. And then as you get older, you're able to go and have fun at a baseball game because you're able to watch, a lot of players playing at a high level and, playing competitively and having interesting ball games. There's been a lot of close games this season. So there's, a lot of promising, there's a lot of promise that you're going to be able to go to the corn crib and have a lot of fun no matter what age you are.
And I expect those attendance numbers too to go up. I think they've definitely gotten a little bit unlucky. Like, for example, the Saturday game, there was a pretty high chance of rain that obviously ended in the 6th inning. But I do think that talking with them and looking ahead at some of those nights that they have coming up, they're going to have their first bobblehead night coming up. I believe this Saturday is the first one, Born in the USA night. Star Wars night's going to have another bobblehead. That's not the Belters, that's the KCL championship, but that's another one that they're really looking forward to. But there's really a lot of good theme nights still left on the schedule. Margaritaville night is out there. I know that's one that I believe that won our little intern poll that we did. But I think
ball.
Yeah, the beach ball. I don't think it was for the beach ball, but
well, I can't think of any reason why you're excited about Margaritaville night. But yeah, that's a big one too.
I know the staff are super excited for that one too, and I think that they're going to start to pick up. I know that the bobblehead nights are big draws, obviously, and I think that with the quality of play that the Belters are playing at too, I think that, and with obviously the summer months, when I think July, I think baseball. I think that NBA's over, NHL's over. I think that really baseball is going to dominate the scene, and I expect to see that the corporate attendance will pick up.
So we had a pretty, statistic analytic heavy first half of this podcast. So I do want to go a little bit more into what we see just around the corn crib, the environment. I mean, what it's like to work there from our perspectives. And the theme nights, I love the theme nights, and it's definitely not the same experience as MLB theme nights. They're we have this giveaway jersey or and there's not really theme nights.
They're not playing the music or anything.
Right. And with the corn crib, we have Awful Night was my favorite one. I spent 5 hours beforehand looking up the worst remixes, the worst music ever, and just playing it and watching fans laugh at the music and having just so much fun watching their kids, because it's a collegiate league, so parents come out to watch their kids play, and just having a fun time while being able to sit back, relax, and enjoy the game it's so fun and rewarding for us, is knowing that we are making this special for them. I know personally, so this Friday is Princesses and Pirates night, and my sister went thrift shopping for a prom dress for this week so she could come as a princess, and I love that. And we just see a lot of fun, especially we have a lot of kids here. So we had Splash Day recently. I would like to talk about Splash Day for us who were there.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, Splash Day, I think it started off with a splash. Fun, very intended there with the 3 home runs. But that was just a really fun experience. We had 3 different kids groups out there, and they got reserved seats, so they were all sitting directly behind home plate. And they were all excited there when Corny was there. And it was something I know that the Belters coaches mentioned too, that they thought invigorated them in that first game. It was something that was really helpful. And I really liked it. I mean, they were singing, they knew the lyrics to the It's Ready Taco song. That was really funny when they were all singing along to it. And they were just really getting into the game and making a lot of noise. And even though it may not have been, I think they had a couple of bigger crowds. I think it was the loudest crowd by far. It's a group of little kids, but
they were chanting Corny. I think that's what I remember talking about. I couldn't tell when I was broadcasting it what they were chanting, but I eventually figured out at one point they were chanting Corny. I think they were also chanting maybe home run at one point.
So they were chanting a home run, let's go, Corny. But they're kids. They're pretty little kids, so it's not as organized as you would see with maybe student sections at high school games. So half of them would be saying let's go, half of them would be saying home run, and then they'd switch, because we're oh wait, we're all going to do the same thing, but they all switch, and it's just an even bigger chanting mess, but I definitely noticed like the energy in the corn crib was just like everyone had smiles on their faces because like Corny would appear from like behind one of the buildings and just like the sea of children in front of the PA booth would all turn and start like, we're like, oh my gosh, Corny. And just all of these kids are like yelling and having such a good time. And even though they don't maybe understand what's happening in front of them, they're having a good time and they're out in the sun and they're having fun, you know, and that's just so important for these kids to have. And hopefully like it grows a love for them in baseball because, you know, CornBelters tickets, they're $8. We have a bunch of fun theme nights. Like you can come get some concessions, which are also extremely cheap.
The chicken tenders with the barbecue sauce. If you have been to the corn crib and have not gotten an experience of eating the chicken tenders with the barbecue sauce, you need to do it because it's amazing. And even if you're not really a barbecue sauce person, you will enjoy the barbecue sauce that they have there. It's so good. Like I get it all the time.
I would like to bring up a little story. So one third of our hosts aren't here, Blake. He's on vacation right now. One night, it was a KCL doubleheader and he got chicken tenders and fries. He got chicken and tenders and fries to eat. And he's like, yeah, I'm eating dinner. And he was like so excited. And
he was
like so excited because their chicken tenders are like that good. And he had his little basket and he accidentally like knocked them onto the ground of like the PA room. And I have not seen a person more dejected than Blake in that moment.
He was so sad.
He
I
was
was watching it from the next one. He stared at it for a good
like
minute.
he was standing and he just looked at this like turned over bucket of chicken tenders and he was just like I knew he was contemplating everything in that moment.
I would be absolutely the chicken tenders and fries there. With the ranch too. They have a really good ranch there. That's
Good ranch.
I would say they have pretty good ranch.
Okay, I need to try the ranch.
You just gotta ask for it. I like barbecue. I'm a big ranch guy, so I like ranch. That you guys are covering all the. We do little weekly update polls, and we covered a lot of the topics so far. Since we talked about theme nights, and we also talked about food. The winner of the food one section, I believe, the funnel cake fries.
Yeah.
Those are something that if you've not gotten a chance to try, they are really good. They're definitely the powdered sugar, and they come out nice and warm. That's probably my favorite item. The pulled pork nacho is definitely another.
I love that.
We all
Oh, okay.
So for the broadcast interns, what we've been doing is we've edited walk-up songs for all 4 KCL teams and the CornBelters. So I've gotten familiar because we play music as well. So like we're very familiar with the walk-up songs for the different teams. And, you know, I now am introduced to a lot of different music. And it's hilarious because like the different like music that the CornBelters choose as their walk-up songs is hilarious. Because I know Bodie Gabink, his mound song is Kickstart My Heart by Motley Crue. And I know Jackson Chatterton's is I'm Too Sexy. And it's hilarious because some of them are these like intense rap songs. And then some of them are like just these like pump it up crowd songs. And so it's so fun to like, and like also what you do is when you come to games enough or you work most of the games is you hear a walk-up song and you're like, oh, I know who's batting. And you connect it to that person. So it's fun to be like, oh, and you connect like these songs and it's just so fun to experience like the music and the food and everything all together is just an amazing experience.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree. I mean, it's a really fun time coming out to the corn crib. I really enjoyed it. Depending on, sometimes we're in the PA booth, it really depends what we're doing the day. And then other times I'm working, scoring the game on a scoring system called Presto. But overall, I mean, I've had a really fun time coming out to the corn crib, and so much so that I'm even finding myself there on my days off, just kind of there eating the chicken tenders and fries, and just kind of hanging out with the other analytics interns and just interns in general, watching some really fun baseball.
And I think that's such an important thing for the workplace is when the staff genuinely enjoys being there. And like when you run into like staff members who just are like love the corn crib and love going there, it's going to be such a better fan experience. And I know my family came a few weeks ago and they said after the game, like the gate workers were so kind and, you know, smiling as you left and chatting with you. And I've even seen it after games, you know, I'll see the gate workers, you know, say goodbye. And it just creates an environment like a home away from home. I know some of our front office jokes that the Corn Crib is their home away from home because we're there so much. I definitely feel that way because I spend a lot of time at the Corn Crib. That like the PA booth is kind of my second little home. And so it's always fun, I think, because I mean, I'm from Bradley and I kind of grew up in the south suburbs of Chicago. I know Braden, you go to ISU. And we have our very own Guardians fan who's also from Florida and goes to school in Texas. And I know the analytics team, hilariously enough, are all from very different places. You want to talk about that a little more?
So we have, if I can name them all off the top of my head, I'm from Houston, or I'm from South Florida. I go to school in Houston. We have Jacob from Penn State, from Pennsylvania. We do have one person from here, Christian. He is from, I think he goes to ISU. We have Clark, who's from Wisconsin. Cade, who is from the Quad Cities area, I believe, goes to school in Kansas. We have Matt, who's from New York. He goes to school at SUNY Oswego. Ian, who's from Louisiana, who goes to school at LSU. And Robert, he's a newer one. He joined us about a couple weeks ago because he's from California and goes to school at UCLA. Really hope I named all of them. I'm so sorry if I didn't. But really, none of us are even from the same state. I don't think. Maybe Katie and Christian, I guess, are. But really, none of us are from really the same state.
Area.
Yeah, we're all from different areas. We're all at least an hour away from each other, and we all have totally different experiences in terms of what we can contribute to the team. So, for example, I'm someone who's I know a little bit more about audit coding. So a lot of the coding projects that we work on is something that I take on. But for example, Cade is the coach of he coaches a high school baseball team. So he kind of brings in that coaching experience with him. So we all definitely come from different backgrounds and different ideas. We're all taking up different things. Another example, like Ian, for example, he's coming in. He's someone who's pitched before, so he's coming in. He's taking a lot of trucks for Rapsoda. So we've all definitely come in with different levels of baseball experience. From people who played in high school to one of us has never even played a game of organized baseball before.
Good. I'd also like to touch on what you guys were talking earlier about having fun with this internship. There's not very many jobs that I've had where I would be like willing to, be as excited to, start a shift as I am when I go to the Corn Crib. Or like Meagan, last week I decided I would take one of your shifts on Thursday because I was going to be off on Friday and Saturday, so I felt bad. But like that would have been something that I would never have been willing to do at some of my other jobs that I've not been able to have as much fun doing. So it's a lot of fun to be able to go out there and at the end of the day, like a bad day at the ballpark is not really all that bad. So
yeah, and there's 3 broadcast interns, me, Blake, and Braden, and we have a lot of different responsibilities. We run the podcast, we do PLTV broadcasts, we sometimes do PA if our PA guy Tommy's not here, we do music, we do a video board, and there's 3 of us, and so and us in the analytics, we are the 2 smallest groups, and so it's kind of nice because I know I bother the analytics guys like all of the time. I'm sure they're like, please get out of this office, and I'm like, hey guys, what stats you got for me today?
Things. There's a lot of people that I still have not been able to meet, but the people that I have been able to meet, they've been a lot of fun, and I really appreciate that about this internship too. Is that there's just been a lot of fun people that have a lot of different experiences, have a lot of different things to talk about. I like who's the curly-haired redhead kid that like runs a Twitter account that's like #1.
Sebastian.
Yeah. That guy's funny. I like that dude.
I live with 3 other roommates, and that's actually one of them. Sebastian, Jacob. I don't know if you've met Adam yet. That's my roommate.
I have not met Adam yet, but Sebastian's cool, and the people in the Corn Crib Cafe, like they're all kind of funny.
Oh my gosh, everyone who works at concessions are hilarious.
Very funny.
And the ops guys were moving something really heavy across the field, and they were like cheering for me to play like different music to like hype them up. And so we kind of have like a cross section of interns. Like I know like the broadcast and analytics, we talk a lot. And I know like sales and marketing talk a lot, and sales and broadcast. So it's so fun because like we all have very different jobs, but there are points where we meet. And speaking of other interns, you should come hang out at Blown Up East Co. We have a huge room, and you should all come out, hang out, watch the podcast, be guests on the podcast. We would love to have different voices come on and talk about what it's like to intern with the Corn Crib, what does it mean? What does baseball operations mean? What does baseball marketing mean? And we would love to have different voices and perspectives to come out and just hang out. I mean, we have an awesome NBA jam room that you all should come and see. And we'd love to, have you all on here.
Or you could just come and hang out. Like if you're shy, for example, you don't have to be on the broadcast. We'd be a little bit disappointed, but I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to do here. So you can watch us. You can stay afterwards and go for some, swings,
Yep.
with the golf balls and stuff like
You
that.
do get a discount, a corn crib discount
Yeah.
on hitting golf balls.
Yeah.
Suggest on the golf balls. See how it is. Let's see what it looks like. It's pretty good.
Yeah, and if you don't like being on podcasts, you're more than welcome to hang out. And if you are like, well, how does a podcast work? What does that look like? You just come out and watch. Like, we'd love to, have an audience. I think it'd be a little fun to have an audience just like sitting behind us and it's like, is this what a podcast is?
Yeah.
So please come on out. We'd love to have you. Front office staff, you're more than welcome to also come hang out. Like, come hang out. Fans, parents. Like, look, if your kid is a cornbelter, come on out and we'll talk and have a fun conversation. Players, if you are a player and you are listening to this, we'd love to have some player perspectives about the cornbelters. We'll get working on that. And I think we're going to have some exciting segments coming up. We'd like to have a few special uploads. So I'm just going to tease that a little for all you listeners to come back and keep checking up. We try to update on Tuesday nights or Wednesdays. We have to do some post stuff, but just keep checking us out. We have a lot of fun here and we love talking about the cornbelters.
Yeah, so thank you so much for tuning in to the 5th episode of Corn on the Call. Thank you, Jeff, for hanging out with us and being able to talk some Cornbelters baseball with us.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun, and thank you guys for having me.
All right, well, this has been Corn on the Call. Catch us next week on Corn on the Call.